Today, we're going to put together a kale and sausage soup. It is a delicious meal for a cold and snowy day. And you know what? I'm also going to put together my homemade seasoning mix. And I'm telling you what, that homemade seasoning mix, when you sprinkle it on a tree, it would taste good. So, let's get it going. I'm taking my time and chopping up the vegetables, and we've chopped up some celery and onions. You know, those are the things that you're going to almost always put in your soup. And I'm dicing, especially these onions, pretty small because this is a very strong onion. Now, while it will be fine for the soup, it is making me cry. So I'm just keeping it small and getting them diced up very tiny. Now, like I said, we're going to make this kale and sausage soup, and I make this probably at least once a year because of the fact that we love going to a particular restaurant, and that restaurant is Carrabba's. And Carrabba's is a little Italian restaurant that has absolutely delicious food. It has delicious bread. It has delicious wine, and typically the servers are perfect. They're very kind, very attentive, and you know, those are the kind of places that you don't mind spending your money for. And my family usually chooses Carrabba's to go to. Now, in our soup, we're going to be placing some hot Italian sausage. We're going to have 2 cans of beans, and we're also going to put in some crushed tomatoes. And I had this large can of crushed tomatoes, so I'm not sure how much of that I'll actually use. All right, let's look at the homemade seasoning mix. We've got at 1/8 cup measure. So I'm going to start with salt. And I'm thinking I'll probably put about 1/8. And I'm going to look at that in the jar because that's how I kind of measure what my comparisons are between the different seasonings. And I'm looking at that salt thinking that's probably not enough. So we've actually put in 1/4 cup of salt. And of course, where there's salt, you need pepper. And I'm really a pepper girl. I'm kind of cutting back on the salt, but I love pepper. So I'm going to put in 3 1/8 cups of our pepper, and it's ground. And this is pepper from Costco. And typically, it's very good and it's very potent. So 3 of these will be just perfect. Now, 3. Okay. Usually in a homemade mix, you're going to need some, let's see, we've got garlic and we've got garlic powder. So I'm shaking this up because what I do is that if I buy some additional garlic powder, I just kind of throw it all in this one container. So let's see how much garlic we'll actually get in. I've got a 1/8, there's 1 that we're going to be putting in. And let's see, we're going to put in 2. So that's a 1/4. Whoops, I made a mess. And you know, we need a little more in there since I spilt some, but that's okay. That's why I put it on the board so I could kind of have a quick and easy cleanup. We also need onion powder. And you know, later on, certainly when you are actually preparing your dish, if you find that you need extras, extra onion or extra garlic, you can go back and add more. So that's another reason why I didn't put in too much salt. So I've got 2 measures of onion powder. And then we're going to take a look at the paprika. And yes, we're going to put paprika in. And I've got this little bitty container that I think I'm going to take all of I have 2 or 3 containers of paprika, put them in one container so it's easy. So we've got about 1/8 in at this point. So we're going to add in 1 more. And I could certainly, once I look at this, I look at the color and the color of my seasoning mix, and then I can always add something extra. So I'm going to add in just a touch of ginger because we like a little ginger, and I don't want a lot. I just want a little. So as you can see, I'm only putting in about 1/16 of ginger, just enough to give you that little hint in the background. And I'm going to put in a touch of ground mustard because it is going to add a special touch and spice to your mix. So I put in about 1/16 of that in as well. Now, here's Italian herbs. I'm going to add some of those in. I don't want too many because sometimes they might burn. So I've got about 1/8 of a cup in of the Italian herbs. Now, once I really start to shake this up, I can look at the color and see whether or not I need to add more. Now, I'm adding in about 1/16 of pepperoncino into the mix. And you know I do that. Pepperoncino are those red pepper flakes. And if you don't want red pepper flakes, you know my philosophy. You do you. You can always adjust it for you, and if that's something you don't want. So I'm going to give this a really good shake. And then I'm going to look at the color because it's going to darken just a bit because we've got paprika in there, and I'm looking at that color. And originally I had chili seasoning mix in there, but that's not what's in there this time. So I know that that's my homemade seasoning mix. And if I find that little round sticker, I'll put it on top of there. So let's get cleaned up and get everything put back where it needs to go. So there we go. We've got our mix, and I didn't add anything extra. This sausage kale soup is going to come together very quickly. So my brazier is on the stove, and the heat is on. I've got it on probably a little medium high. I want it to cook, but I don't want it to burn. So we're going to be careful with that. I'm just going to throw all the meat stuff away. I've got a sink full of soapy water so I can stick my hand in there when I need to. So I'm adding a couple of teaspoons of oil, even though I know that the meat has a little bit of fat. But until it starts to really cook and take off, we're going to have to help it along the way. So I'm taking my wooden spoon and I'm breaking it up. That's my paddle. And just breaking up the sausage portion. So let's get that broken up. Let's get it prepared, and you'll know when it's ready. And I don't want to put anything else in there until most of this sausage is done. So I'm moving right along, and I sped this up just a little bit so you won't have to sit here too long. But you know what? This is going to be a good soup. Now, you're thinking because it said hot Italian sausage that it's going to be scorching and with spice. No, it's not. It's just that it's going to give you a good background flavor. So I'm adding in a teaspoon of homemade seasoning, about 1.5 teaspoons. And I think that might be just enough. So we're going to give that a good mix because I don't want any of that to stick. So here we're adding in our onions and our celery. And I like to put it in the middle of the pan, and then the rest will continue to cook. Of course, whatever little pieces of sausage that aren't quite finished will finish up as the onion and celery also comes to temperature. Now we're going to let that onion and celery get a good head start. Then we're going to start to add in the rest. So now that it has, we're going to put in our 2 cans of drained beans. And these are cannelli beans. And I'm going to give them a good stir. And this is going to need to cook because we have beans. We want them to cook down and be nice and soft. Now, like I said, I had this huge can of crushed tomatoes. So we've got a 1 cup measure. So that's 1, 2. Okay, 3. Actually, that's a half cup measure. So that's 1.5 cups of the crushed tomatoes that I've put in. And it's not really a tomato soup, so the tomato just kind of gives it a little hint in the background, but and adds a pretty color too. So I'm going to add in 4 cups of chicken broth. And you can use chicken stock. If you have homemade, then certainly you can do that. But this is organic chicken broth that I'm adding in. And I'm not going to put any other chicken bouillon or any of that in, because I think that hot Italian sausage has enough seasoning that it's going to give it the flavor that it needs. So I'm also going to add just a little bit more, because I want it to cook down and I want those beans to cook well. So as you can see, we added 2 more cups of chicken broth. And you know, you just kind of have to look at it as it starts to cook and it starts to boil. And I'm going to let this come up to a hard boil. But every now and then I'm going to walk over with that paddle and run it across the bottom of the pan, because we don't want the beans to stick. So let's cover it, let it get good and hot. I've got the paddle there ready to go. While that's happening, we're able to get everything cleaned up. And I'm going to let this simmer on the stove. Now, you know, you could do this about 12 in the afternoon, around lunchtime, and let it simmer low and slow. And by dinner time, all of those flavors will have had a chance to go through the soup. And it will be absolutely delicious. So we're playing around with that. We're letting it go, and I'm trying to get things clean. So let's come back to that and see what it's going to look like. Are you ready? We're going to take the top off of this soup. Woo! Man, it's bubbling, and you know, we need smell-o-vision, because let me tell you, this is good stuff. You know, when it's cold and snowy, you want something hot. Now it's time to add the kale. And how much kale you put into this is really up to you. Now this is a pre-washed kale, and I'm going to add in, a few handfuls. I'm not quite sure how much. You'll see that. I've got 2 in, and you know, it's going to reduce once it's in the hot liquid. So I'm just kind of pushing it in and letting it simmer. Now, because this is a kale, a bag of kale, sometimes the manufacturers don't necessarily get all of the larger stems out like we would if we were going to do it by hand. And that's okay. So when I see a large stem, I just pick it out and throw it away. So I'm looking at that and looking at the color of it, and I think that's just right. I don't think I really need to add much more. So let's put the top on it. Oh, guys, this has cooked now for 2 hours. I let it simmer low and slow 2 hours. And look at our kale and sausage soup. Yummy. This is going to be so good. You know, put this next to some cornbread or your favorite crackers, or you might even want a good Italian bread. Whether you made it or you bought it, it doesn't matter, as long as it's good. I like my Italian bread toasted with a little garlic and butter, and just kind of let it, you know, stick it in and dip and take it out and have a bite. This is perfect. Family, you have to make this soup as soon as possible, because it's going to be so good. And it's going to warm not only the tummies of your family, but their hearts as well. And you, of course. Now, I hope that you have certainly enjoyed today, and being able to be in the kitchen together and talk and to chit chat while we cook. That was so much fun. And you know, that homemade seasoning mix, you're going to see that a lot because we're going to be using it just about every day. Now, I hope that if you're not a family member and you're here, thank you very much for coming by, but don't leave without subscribing because you want to join the family and you want to be a part of what's going on in this kitchen. There is much love here. And so, without further ado, I'm going to get to that bowl of soup, and I hope you have an absolutely blessed and glorious, warm, and safe evening. Have fun. I'll see you soon right here in the kitchen of Ebony, Ivy, and Thyme.